Welcome back to another card review. This time around, we're taking a look at the Death Knight cards from the core set and the Path of Arthas set. Wanted to keep it separate here between the expansion and the Death Knight cards outside of the expansion set. We're going to kick it off with Patchwork. Crazy card. I think this one is absolutely amazing. 7 mana, 4/6. Undead type, battle cry, destroy a random minion in your opponent's hand, deck, and battlefield. So you've got removal on board, this deadly shot style effect. You've got an eat in hand, basically a Mutanus style effect with the potential to destroy your opponent's resource or combo piece, Eat their Denathrius. And you've got ability to clear something in deck as well. If you didn't catch the Denathrius in hand, maybe you'll get the one out of the deck. So all in all, removing 2 resources from your opponent, but also removing that onboard threat potentially as well, which makes this a crazy swing card. We've already seen a card like Mutanus get played a ton. This is essentially Mutanus plus. You don't really care too much usually about the Mutanus stat line, the fact that it gets bigger. It's often more about eating that thing of your opponent's, and Patchwork eats a lot of stuff. So, although you're losing some stats on the minion itself, you might be gaining more stats than that effectively by clearing something on board. That's still going to be a net stat advantage as well. So all in all, Patchwork is just like a better Mutanus. Mutanus is already an excellent card. I think a lot of Death Knight decks are going to try to find any way to run Patchwork. Now, they are going to have to run 1 Blood Rune to put Patchwork in. As you can see, he's a single Blood Rune card. So you can't run Patchwork alongside any of the triple rune cards, of which there will be a few later. Does that mean that Patchwork is so good that other triple rune decks that aren't blood can't really be feasible without Patchwork? I'm sure they'll still be fine, but I think a lot of decks will stick to at least 1 Blood Rune to squeeze in a powerful card like this one. Control decks in particular seems like a great tool, so I think Patchwork is A+, awesome card, gonna be run a ton, and I think will often even encourage a rune fit just to get him into the deck. Speaking of triple rune cards, we have Lord Marrowgar, the triple unholy. So you can't run Lord Marrowgar and Patchwork, unfortunately, but this might be reason to run a triple unholy deck because Lord Marrowgar is pretty crazy. 8 mana, 9/7 undead. Battlecry, raise all your corpses as 1/1 risen golems with rush for each that can't fit. Give 1 +2/+2. Quick recap, of course, as minions die throughout the game for Death Knight, they stack up as corpses on a little counter under your mana. You might get 10, 15 corpses, then drop a Lord Marrowgar. He's going to raise you 6 minions. And then if you had 15 corpses, he's going to buff your board for another, 18 in stats, allowing you to potentially take some nice trades with all these rush minions and also leave behind a monster board of threats. So I like that this has that swing potential. Without the rush, I would feel like this is just a little bit too passive on board, just kind of plays into removal too easily, might not be swingy enough. But because this has rush, that gives it that reactivity, that makes it quick enough. If you're behind in a board-based matchup, you can take some trades, and then hopefully that's enough counter pressure to win. So if your opponent plays like a Rafaam, you play this, you clear off the Rafaam minions, and they're kind of like, oh god, what do I do against this Lord Marrowgar? I know the mana doesn't line up perfectly there, but you can still imagine those sorts of board states. So I think that makes this good. I guess there is some question about like deck structure, and are you spending a lot of your corpses beforehand? Are you able to get enough corpses to make this feel compelling? Is 15 a commonly seen number, or is it normally like 7? Because if you're at 7 corpses when you're playing this, far less interesting, I think. Some 1/1s and maybe 1 3/3 or something is not as exciting as a board full of multiple 3/3s and 5/5s that can all take great trades. So I guess this is one you kind of have to see in action a little bit just to see how commonly Death Knight's getting high corpse totals. But from what we've seen for unholy focused cards in particular, there's a lot of ways to make stuff. We're going to see a few of those cards here in a minute. And if you're running triple unholy for Lord Marrowgar, because you have to get Lord Marrowgar, I suspect you're going to have a lot of corpses. So this does really feel like a very strong payoff to me. And I like that it has that reactivity. That's really going to save a card like this one. Moving on to a Frost legendary. We've got the double Frost rune here. So a little bit of flexibility with this one. You can run this in a deck running Patchwork, for instance, with a single Blood Rune there left over. That would be potentially a fit. But Overseer Frigidara is a 6 mana 5/6 with Battlecry, draw 2 spells. If they're both frost spells, deal 2 damage to all enemies. So this card is doing a little bit of everything. You're getting a body on board, you're getting some card draw. Typically, we like cheaper card draw in Hearthstone. Card draw that's bundled into a higher cost thing can be a little bit iffy just because often you need the cards more than you need the body on board or the effect. This has this conditional effect that deals 2 to all enemies. That's both face and minions. I personally think that's pretty low by the time you're getting up to a 6 mana turn. So in essence, you've got a card here that does, kind of inefficient card draw ultimately. Not technically inefficient because it's on a stick, but not cheap card draw. Not cheap, flexible card draw like we often like. It's got this damage output that's really not going to line up very well that often on turn 6. It's got this body that's not all that exciting. It doesn't do anything extra. So basically, although this card does a lot, it's one of those jack of all trades, master of none scenarios where it's going to be okay feeling in numerous instances, but how often is it actually going to feel really good? Is it going to feel like a powerful play? A lot of the times cards that just feel okay in Hearthstone kind of get left out because you're looking for really impactful, really immediate, really direct sort of effects that have a nice specific focus. I need a great board clear. I don't need a mediocre board clear that's got a couple other mediocre things attached to it. I want to be really, really decisive in any given turn. So I do worry this is going to be one of those cards that's like, there's never a great moment to play this. I need cards, but I need mana left over. I need a board clear, but this one isn't big enough. So I think Overseer Frigidara, despite looking okay, is actually going to feel kind of weak because okay just doesn't always cut it. So with the legendaries out of the way, I wanted to move over to some blood cards, starting off with Blood Boil, a 2 blood rune card, 5 mana, shadow spell, lifesteal, and it reads, infect all enemy minions at the end of your turns, they take 2 damage. So this is sort of a damage over time effect and a really cool one. And the more I look at this one, the more I like it. I actually think this card has a lot of potential. So first and foremost, straight up, sometimes it's just going to be like a Holy Nova style effect where your opponent has a board of 2/2s and you play Blood Boil and you clear those and you actually heal way more than something like the Holy Nova. That's only healing you 2. In this case, they got 7 minions. You're healing 14 off of the Blood Boil, but even just 3 or 4 is still a really substantial heal and swing. So it's kind of got like Ranker vibes there. It's only hitting enemy minions, but still a lot of life gain potential off the Blood Boil. So that's awesome. And you have this other bonus that it doesn't stop there. If that doesn't kill the minions on the first wave, if they have like 2 3s or 2 4s or 4 4s, whatever it is, this is still going to do work the following turn, and it adds that inevitability. The opponent's minions are eventually gonna die, and if you just stall long enough or heal long enough, like, this is going to eventually resolve that board, even if it takes a few turns, because you're infecting them with this damage over time and you're healing up over time as well. So I think that's actually really cool. The heal basically means you're often going to get more time for this to serve as a removal. So those board states where it's like a couple 2 health minions and a couple 3 health minions, yeah, Blood Boil's still gonna work nicely. Like, you don't have to fully resolve the board right now. Deal with it next turn, you're probably gonna be fine. There are some risks there. Obviously the opponent can like leverage those minions on board with a Battlegrounds Battle Master and whack you in the face, a Bloodlust, some buffs, whatever it might be. There's risks, but I still think the total payoff for this card is really high. It's just so much healing off that lifesteal aspect. So I don't know. Oh, there's also kind of a nifty play where if they like had a 1 attack minion or a 0 attack minion, you could like try to keep their minion alive and just like farm it for health. Just turn it into health farm. Like, if you could heal it every turn or something, or if it just had a ton of health to work with and it wasn't dealing more than 2 damage to you, it's just like a free source of heals, right? So totems in particular are in trouble with the Blood Boil, but all in all, I just think this serves as a really nice removal tool that has a lot of healing and life gain attached to it, and that seems pretty strong. So next up is the Gnome Muncher, a single blood rune card, 6 mana 5/6 undead, taunt, and lifesteal. At the end of your turn, attack the lowest health enemy. And I like this card. I like that you're guaranteed to get some healing off of it, because it's going to attack something. I guess there's a very rare chance of Divine Shields or whatever where this doesn't technically heal, but you get the idea. And it can go face, so sometimes this could just be like 5 to face that ends a game. Like you clear a board and play this, and it's like boom, that's the lethal push I needed. I think other times, you know, you hit a 3/3 and you're pretty happy. You cleared a little thing, you healed 5, you'll leave behind a body because I think it'll often value trade, and maybe even heal a little more off that lifesteal next time around. I think that all works actually rather nicely. It's a little expensive at 6 mana, but we're seeing this blood stuff looking like a control deck. Looks like they're going into the mid game, and I actually think this packs enough punch. This kind of reminds me of Priest's Colossal a little bit. The Black Scale Brute. No, that's Warrior. Blackwater Behemoth? Maybe? Reminds me a little bit of that, like a light version that's, you know, not as high output, but does a very similar thing. Seems to synergize well with the class. Can actually go face, which is a little bit of a bonus, and snipes off a reliable target. So you have a little bit more control here over when you're using this. All in all, I think that makes for a successful card. Next up is Obliterate. We all know this one. This was one of the original Death Knight cards from the Lich King. It's a single blood rune, 2 mana spell. Destroy a minion, your hero takes damage equal to its health. And yeah, I think this will be a solid option. Clearly, the Blood Death Knights are going to have a lot of ways to gain life, health manipulation, that sort of stuff. Seems like their synergy, and a very efficient removal tool here for 2 mana that plays naturally into that. You want to use your lifesteal to advantage. It doesn't hurt to take a little bit of chip damage here and there. Obliterate can often, I think you'll be happy killing some 3/3s and 4/4s with it in the early to mid game just to stabilize a little bit, and then sometimes hitting an 8/8 is going to be fine as well. So all in all, nice, flexible, cheap removal card. So now let's move over to the Unholy cards, kicking it off with the Battlefield Necromancer. This is a double Unholy rune, 2 mana 2/3. At the end of your turn, raise a corpse as a 1/2 Risen Footman with Taunt. And just a reminder, when you're raising the corpses off of your corpse counter, if they are a Risen card, that means they will not recontribute to the corpse total. So you do lose a corpse here. Now, the Battlefield Necromancer itself, when it dies, it'll give you a corpse. So all in all, you're still going to get one back. But a way to get a couple bodies in play, just not a way to, like, you know, net gain on your corpse total here with the Risen cards. But nonetheless, I think this deck's going to want to play a lot of token stuff, even if this doesn't contribute directly to corpse synergies. I'm sure you're still going to have lots of ways to utilize these wide boards and just get some stats in play early, and this gets you a nice amount of stats. Now, notably on turn 2, are you going to have a corpse by then? Are you going to have something that died on turn 1 if you want to play this on curve? That's a little bit shakier to me. It's probably some cards that will help contribute to that, but I don't think it'll be super reliable. So this might be a card that's more about coming down later in the game. Play this on turn 3, turn 4, you know, start to weave it into your mana there. Doesn't seem as exciting to me then. The 1/2 taunt's just really going to get ran over at that stage. I don't think it's nearly as disruptive. Can sometimes protect key targets, but all in all, this is a fine looking card. I just don't think this is going to be a staple for undead decks necessarily, or corpse-driven token decks, whatever you want to call all that stuff, whatever way you slice it. This just doesn't feel quite high output enough. I think it's just a little bit too fair. Next up is Army of the Dead, a 5 mana shadow spell, double Unholy rune this time around. This one will raise up to 5 corpses as 2/2 Risen Ghouls with Rush. Now again, those are Risen Ghouls. They will not recontribute to your corpse counter, but certainly do give you the ability to trade in a little bit on turn 5, stabilize the board some, maybe even leave a couple minions behind. On average, 5 minions with Rush is a lot, and because, you know, they're split off across smaller bodies, gives you a little bit more granularity when taking trades. Kill a couple 4/4s, kill a 2/2. You got some stuff left behind. This kind of has like Scale of Onyxia sort of vibes, of course, but the minions are even better, and I think in that regard looks solid. I mean, this is going to be a great way to either build a board. Sometimes you need it if your opponent doesn't have anything. Just making 5 2/2s is still scary, still threatening, a lot of stats out in play, or having that reactivity as needed as well. All of that seems good. Getting up to 5 corpses by turn 5 doesn't sound insane to me. It doesn't sound like that'll be too hard to do, because we're going to see cards like Graveyard Shift that get you a lot of corpses, you know, ready to go on turn 3. So I don't think this will have too many consistency problems there. There will be those moments where this doesn't quite get up to 5. This is up to 5, so, you know, you could only summon 2 or 3 of your corpse counters bad. Maybe you top deck this late in the game, you're kind of light on corpses. There could be instances where this whiffs, but I think on curve, when it's most impactful, most often likely to be played, it's probably still a very, very powerful card. So a little teaser there for Graveyard Shift, 3-mana spell, summon 2 1/1 zombies with Reborn. So that is 4 total 1/1s off of the Graveyard Shift here, split off against that Reborn, so not all out at once, but ultimately still a lot of stuff to work with for Undead synergies, stuff to work with for Corpse synergies, of course. And I think a card like this will likely be a good fuel for those sorts of decks. It's not really that strong in its own right. Obviously, getting 4 1/1s without some kind of payoff is not amazing these days in Hearthstone. It's great for imps, but that's because they had the big payoff. So it's not going to look great in its own right, but as you start to look at those payoff cards, the Corpse Enabler, suddenly you're saying, okay, Graveyard Shift becomes an important part of this puzzle. I need this to set everything up, and I think that'll make Graveyard Shift a pretty nice card. We've already seen too, like the Acolyte card that draws cards when minions die. Play a Graveyard Shift, have a couple Reborn zombies left over. That's perfect to help you draw cards, perfect to set up your corpses. So I think this card will be pretty good. Moving on to the Plague Strike, a 2-mana single rune Shadow Unholy card. Plague Strike deals 3 damage to a minion, so nice little swing. And if it kills it, it summons a 2/2 zombie with Rush. So yeah, I like this. Nice little swing card. Baby Flanking Strike. And with a good minion, 2/2 with Rush can be nice. So helps you clean off a couple things sometimes in the early to mid game. That'll feel really good. And extra bodies on board sounds like it's going to be great for Unholy decks. So yeah, this looks like a nice little staple early game option. Moving on to the Dark Transformation, a 2-mana single Unholy rune. Shadow spell, transform an undead into a 4/5 undead monstrosity with Rush. So take one of your tiny 1/1 zombies from Graveyard Shift and turn it into a 4/5 with Rush, effectively making this a 3/4 buff for 2 mana. Blessing of Kings is really sad. It's not happy about this, and yeah, that actually looks pretty good, right? The question of this one is, how often are you going to have that undead reliability for this? But ultimately, even if you just have the hero power, you've got the Death Knight hero power that always gives you a 1/1 undead. That's not going to be terrible. 4 mana to get a 4/5 with Rush. That's okay at the worst case scenario. And very often, I think you're going to have one of those like 1/1 zombies lingering around from Graveyard Shift. And then you're really happy to get a 2-mana 4/5 with Rush, effectively giving up almost nothing for that single 1/1. So yeah, I think this is a cool way to turn your leftover undead into some powerful plays, some swingy plays with Rush. And ultimately, you're still getting an undead back, so you're not losing any of those undead synergies necessarily. So yeah, this looks pretty efficient for 2 mana. I think this will work. So let's go ahead and move over to Frost spells, starting off with the triple Frost rune, Frostwyrm's Fury. So you can't run this with Blood or Unholy cards. You got to commit fully to Frost for this one. 7 mana, Frost Spell School, of course. It deals 5 damage, freezes all enemy minions, and summons a 5/5 Frostwyrm. So this kind of has like Snowfall Guardian vibes, lock down the board, develop a threat, and in this case, deal a little bit of extra damage. Not quite as good as maybe the old Snowfall Guardian that was getting really big stat totals, but this also only freezes enemy minions. So actually, if you have a little bit of board, or if you want to do this over multiple turns and develop a board alongside a couple of these, that's pretty powerful that it's an asymmetrical freeze effect. So I think this has a lot of potential as a finisher. Just launch a couple of these face and just kind of ignore what your opponent's doing and look to end the game. And we're going to see a bunch of other Frost spells that deal a ton of damage as well. So this is like, okay, I'm getting ready to kill you on turn 8 or 9. I'm going to launch a Frostwyrm's Fury to face. I'm going to shut down your board so I'm safe. And then you're just like dead next turn. It feels really good to me. It feels nice and swingy and lethal as well. So, I mean, God, I was just thinking like Firelands Portal, dude, it's in shambles. Looking at this card, absolutely in shambles. So yeah, this looks really strong. And now, is it going to be worth the payoff for a triple Frost deck? It's hard to know that sort of thing. It's hard to envision that. But if you're committing to Frost, I think this will be a card you're very happy to play. We've also got the Frost Strike here, a 2-mana Frost spell. Double Frost rune this time. It deals 3 damage to a minion, and if that kills it, discover a Frost rune card. That is a card, notably not a spell, but a little bit of a value generator here off the Frost Strike. Kill something small and maybe trade this up into a better card, an on-curve play, something that just fits your game plan at any given moment. And I think that'll be pretty nice, actually. I think we need these sorts of little chip removal cards in a lot of decks in Hearthstone, and since this turns into something that's probably very synergistic for your build, if you're already committing to double Frost runes, then yeah, I think that's going to be awesome. And it's a limited pool of stuff too, so you're probably likely to get, you know, some good choices to make sure you actually get a high power play. Next up is the Horn of Winter, a 2-rune, 0 mana frost spell that will refresh 2 mana crystals. So we've had a couple of cards like this in the past. There's been like the Mana Biscuit for Mage that would give you basically this card in your hand, the Mana Biscuit. And then we've got, you know, the modern version of Lightning Bloom. It will refresh 2 mana crystals, but in that case actually has an overload. That card got nerfed and is kind of just objectively worse than this now. Now do keep in mind this is not an innervate effect. It's really important. So you can't go from 2 to 4 mana and play a 4 mana card. You can't cheat out that bigger stuff sooner, but you can play 2 2-mana cards on turn 2, which that can still offer some big potential. I could also see this being used as a like damage enabler where you need to like play some spell damage cards and launch a bunch of frost spells face. Having a couple of these in hand could make sure that you have that additional mana to help you find the damage breakpoints you need when played alongside some kind of setup, spell damage or whatever it might be. So yes, mana gain cards like this always tend to make sense. They always work well in Hearthstone, although not as good as a straight up innervate or mana gain. Still probably the kind of thing that some deck figures out some way to use well. Moving on to the Glacial Advance, a 3-mana single frost rune frost spell, deals 4 damage, and your next spell this turn costs 2 less. So that 4 damage notably can go face, and I think it often probably will go face, and the net cost of this might often be 1 mana if you think about it. If you're playing another spell there and netting that 2 mana discount, you could play a couple of these in a given turn and then just launch a bunch of stuff to your opponent's place. Play this alongside the Frostwyrm's Fury, for instance, for just some mega damage, mega lockdowns. You can see this package coming together. It kind of feels a little bit like old school freeze mage. Freeze, 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 kill, kill, kill. And this has certainly got that kill aspect down well, helping you squeeze together a lot of spells and a lot of damage in any given turn. This looks strong. Moving on to Defrost here, a 2-mana spell with a single frost rune, frost type. Draw a card and spend 2 corpses to draw another. So some efficient 2-for-2 card draw here, I think, in many instances. I think that's probably going to feel worth it for 2 corpses, certainly to draw 2. And decks need cheap, good, flexible card draw, and I think that's exactly what Defrost will be. We've seen a few different 2-for-2 sort of cards work really nicely. We've even seen some 3-for-2 cards work rather nicely in Hearthstone's history, but lately 2-for-2 feels a little bit more fitting. And I don't know exactly if Frost decks are going to have the ability to get corpses really consistently, but they may not have as many needs for corpses either. And notably, this is only a single frost rune, so you can still have a pretty big unholy commitment, get a lot of minions, and use Defrost as a cheap, flexible, given its rune, single rune requirement. It's flexible for deck building, and use this as your card draw tool. So looks good. So far, all the frost cards are looking pretty good. And that said, we'll move over to the runeless cards for Death Knight here. These do not have rune requirements. You can put these in any given rune deck. This is the Skeletal Sidekick, a 1-mana 1/2 undead with Battle Cry. Give a friendly undead +2 attack. So you've got here pretty good buff. That is actually better than something like an Abusive Sergeant, which is a temporary buff. This is a permanent buff. I honestly think this card looks kind of decent in an aggro deck. Just swarm the board with a bunch of undead, throw a bunch of bodies down, use this as a buff to push some additional damage, makes that minion a lot more threatening on board. Your opponent suddenly got a lot of stuff to deal with. You got corpses piling up. Like, I kind of see that coming together. I think this card doesn't look all that exciting or sound that great, but I think it might be sleeper good. And then our final card for the video is Icy Touch, a 1-mana frost spell. Deal 2 damage to an enemy and freeze it. So looking pretty good compared to both Arcane Shot and Frost Shock here, with either bonus damage or bonus effect with the freeze. And yeah, I think that makes this honestly a pretty flexible, nice little card. That model of Arcane Shot cards have been played quite a bit, and I think the freeze here is really impactful. We know that we've got some damage output in these decks too that matter, so just having extra ways to hit face with frost spells is probably relevant for a deck that's looking to go for some burst damage, and the flexibility here to maybe lock down a weapon attack, that sort of thing, freeze a big minion if needed. All of that makes this card both good in the late game, good in the early game, and just a nice, reliable tool across various game states and use cases. So I think this will once again be pretty strong. Patchwork is a 5-star card. Lord Marrowgar is a 4-star card. Overseer Frigidara is a 3-star card. Blood Boil is a 4-star card. Gnome Muncher is a 4-star card. Obliterate is a 4-star card. Battlefield Necromancer is a 2-star card. Army of the Dead is a 4-star card. Plague Strike is a 4-star card. Graveyard Shift is a 3-star card. Dark Transformation is a 4-star card. Frostworm's Fury is a 4-star card. Frost Strike is a 3-star card. Horn of Winter is a 4-star card. Glacial Advance is a 4-star card. Defrost is a 3-star card. Skeletal Sidekick is a 3-star card. Icy Touch is a 4-star card. Yeah, man, there were a lot of good cards here. I think there's actually a really good little set of stuff. I was a little less impressed by the expansion cards, I have to say, that were revealed so far. But the Death Knight core set and starter set stuff there looks pretty good. I like a lot of these. Some solid 4-star options. I think these will be like big building blocks for Death Knight, which they're going to need because these are all the cards they have to work with. So maybe not too surprising that the average power level on these seems pretty good to me. But curious what you guys think are going to be the best cards here. Which are your favorites? Which ones are you most excited to play? Share all those thoughts and more in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, game on.